The classical music piece that I decided to go over today is Elfrida Andree's Piano Trio in G minor, the first movement. So, Elfrida Andree was born on February 19th, 1841, in Visby, Sweden. She died on January 11th, 1929, in Gothenburg. Elfrida was born into a family centered around music. Her father, Andreas Andree, was a politician but also had a love for music. Her sister, Fredrika, was a well-known opera singer. She studied composition, Elfrida, at the educational institution of the Royal Swedish Academy of Music. She studied with Ludwig Norman and Niels Gade in 1860. Elfrida was considered to be a female pioneer in Sweden due to her compositions of chamber music and symphonic works. Elfrida was also an advocate for women's rights. In 1867, she became the organist at Gothenburg Cathedral. In 1865, she led a campaign that enabled women to become telegraph operators, and she herself became one as well. The opera Frithiof's Saga was written with her friend Selma Lagerlöf. From Frithiof's Saga, Elfrida took 2 orchestral suites, which would become her best-known works. Elfrida Andree composed a large amount of works, such as 3 symphonies, multiple chamber compositions, 2 organ symphonies, pieces for both piano and organs, Swedish choral masses, and cantatas. When Elfrida died, her compositions were on the way to becoming forgotten, but in the 1980s, they have since made a comeback in Sweden, since her works were not very popular in the United States or other countries. Elfrida Andree was part of the Romantic era, and just as a little bit of background, during the Romantic era, people were looking for more individuality and composers wanted to stand out and be different. Music moved from churches or palaces to public concert halls, and orchestras became more important. Her musical style tends to go back to her roots, and so she'll compose in a Swedish style. For this piece, it was made as a piano trio for piano, violin, and cello. It starts off as Allegro forte, which means fast and loud, and I'll play a clip just to show what I mean. You can hear how it started off at a fast type pace and was kind of powerful sounding, and then it would kind of die down a little bit and come back. And then also the piano got a small solo. It was really only short enough, I think, for the violin and the cello to be able to move their pages so that they could get on the right, get to the right part. So I'll play that for you right here. So you could hear just how short that was, giving the other 2 instruments enough time. For the most part, the melody was conjunct, which is also known as a stepwise motion or movement. Um, Conjunct means that the melody moves in steps between the notes and that the notes are close together. Conjunct is it's the most common type of movement in music, and usually because it's easier for it's easier to play instruments with. There are also a lot of repetition throughout the piece. I have two clips that I'm gonna play as an example of that. This is the first clip. And this is the second clip. So you can really hear the repetition with the violin. The violin has those same notes, and then it has that really high-pitched note. You can also hear it in the piano, going over the same couple of notes. I think my favorite part of the piece is when it shifts from soft and delicate to a more powerful sound. In this part that I'm going to show, there's also some imitation throughout the violin and the cello. And I really like that because it sounds like the instruments are communicating with each other. And I'll point that out after the clip. And so in this little clip, you can hear just how it starts off kind of softer, and then it'll immediately go into being powerful and all of them joining in together. And then we'll go back down, and it just shifts back and forth, and I really like that. But you could hear that imitation between the cello and the violin. And I just think that sounds so cool. Imitation, though, it sounds just like what it means. It's when an instrument will play and then the other instrument will play that same part, and it's like they're in conversation with each other. The cello, though, it never gets the melody. It doesn't ever get to hold that melody. The melody's usually between the violin and the piano. Out of all the instruments, the violin was the easiest for me to hear, and I found myself listening to the violin more. I liked the notes that it played, and I thought that it added a really cool element to the whole piece. At the end of the piece, it goes from a very powerful, loud sound, and then there will be a break in that music, and then it will come back to the instruments playing softly, and then they will draw out their last note. And I'll play that real quick. And you can hear how there's a little bit of a crescendo in at the very beginning, but it's a very short crescendo, and then it'll get very powerful. But there's not really a diminuendo there. It's more of a break, and then it's that last note drawn out. For me, I really enjoyed this piece, and I would listen to it again. Before making this, I listened to it multiple times. It was very interesting to me, and it kept me entertained, and I wanted more. Um, the three instruments I thought complemented each other beautifully, and the players, they were very talented. They're very talented. Um, it also kind of sounded like a song that people would dance to during the Romantic era, kind of like a ballroom music. So yeah, in all, I really enjoyed listening to this piece, and that was the piano trio in G minor, the first movement by Elfrida Andree.